And moments ago, the Shadow Immigration Minister Scott Morrison spoke to Chris Uhlmann in Canberra.
Scott Morrison, welcome to 7:30.
Thanks, Chris.
Have you put your political interests over the public's national interest?
Of course not. We've been consistent with the policy position we've held for a decade. We've offered that position to the government in one amendment to their bill. They refused to adopt that amendment out of stubborn pride, and now they've folded their tent, taken their bat and ball and gone home. They've just given up. It's a disgraceful performance.
Don't you think it's necessary, though, to make it absolutely certain that if you want to do offshore processing, that you have the law behind you?
Well, this is why we offered the amendment. We know we can do Nauru on the existing law, but we offered the support to strengthen the Migration Act, but only where we could maintain the protections which the government wanted to abolish.
And you offered the government something you knew it couldn't accept?
No, the government wants to do offshore processing in Papua New Guinea. They can do that under our amendment. What we provided, which David Bennett QC actually also said, was something that kept the protections and ensured it stayed out of the courts. That's what the amendment should have done from the government. We did it with our bill amendment, and they rejected it.
David Bennett, the man that you just mentioned, is a former Solicitor General.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you take the advice of the current Solicitor General, which is different?
Well, his advice says that our amendment actually goes better and goes beyond what the government has done and in the key objectives of what this bill should achieve. But today, Chris, the Prime Minister's had a humiliation. She hasn't been able to command the confidence of the Parliament on this measure. Now, of course, Minister Bowen should resign, and of course, Prime Minister should resign. But what they must do now is simply call an election and let the Australian people have the say, not just on this mess, but all the mess.
But that's entirely unlikely, isn't it?
Well, that's for the government to be accountable for. This Prime Minister wants to blame everyone, particularly the opposition. Even Chief Justice of the High Court don't miss a spray from the Prime Minister when she's not happy with how things are proceeding on her watch. She needs to take a good look in the mirror.
Doesn't this mean that it is inevitable that we will see more people arriving by boat?
Well, that is a matter for the government. We have offered them our support for offshore processing. We are the architects of offshore processing. We have the proven policies. Now, tonight, what they've said is that they are going to return to the policies of the Greens rather than adopt the policies of the coalition. And I think that just confirms what we all know, and that is Bob Brown's running the country.
And that means more pressure on mandatory detention and more people moving into the community. This is, of course, a system that you will inherit should you get the election that you want and win government.
Having to inherit another mess from a Labor Party while they've been in government is something coalitions are very used to doing. And I think we need to have an election as soon as possible to ensure that that mess doesn't get any worse than it currently is.
Now, the government will offer bridging visas, and it will also that will include some work in the community. Do you have a problem with that?
Look, this mess is going to go from bad to worse. We'll wait to see further detail of what the government is proposing, but what the government should do is they should adopt our amendment and get on with the job.
But you will be aware of the bridging visas that they're talking about, because that's what's happens
well, there
now
are several
who arrive by plane.
Well, there are several options that are available for the type of bridging visas, and it's not clear which ones they plan to use at this stage.
But would you have a problem with that happening?
Well, I don't know which ones they're going to use.
Well, obviously, you know that there is a suite of them.
Well,
would you have a problem with
there are a suite of them, and many have been used in the past for much smaller populations in the detention network when we were using them. What the government now has is chaos and mess all over the detention network, and they also have the problem of the message that something like that would send at such a critical time as this, when their border protection policy is in such chaos. They don't have the confidence of the House, they don't have the confidence of the Australian people, and they didn't have the confidence to put their own bill to a vote in the House today.
What do you think the Australian people make of what they see in politics at the moment, where neither side can agree on something, where at least at basis they seem to have a point of agreement?
Well, I think the Australian people know who to trust on this issue, and now that the difference couldn't be clearer. The proven policies of the coalition, offshore processing, temporary protection visas, turning boats back where the circumstances permit. We've been saying that for a decade. The government rejects it. We should have an election.
Scott Morrison, thank you.
Thanks, Chris.